In April 1946, a 3-year-old boy vanished in broad daylight on a familiar street in Withernsea, East Yorkshire. He was walking just steps behind his older siblings when he disappeared. 56 years later, an anonymous letter arrived, suggesting someone in the small seaside town had known the truth all along. What happened to Peter Greenwood would haunt 4 generations of his family and remain one of Britain's most enduring mysteries, unanswered for nearly 8 decades. The telephone rings at different houses throughout Withernsea on this particular evening, Mrs. Greenwood's voice growing tighter with each call. "Have you seen Peter? Our Peter?" The answer is always the same. No, they haven't. The neighbors step onto their porches, scanning the streets. Someone mentions checking near the lighthouse. Someone else suggests the beach. The voices grow more urgent, overlapping. Where is the boy? But to understand why this absence cuts so deeply, you must first know who Peter Greenwood is when he's present. Not as a photograph frozen in time, not as a case file gathering dust, but as a living child who occupies space in the world with all the particularity that makes any person irreplaceable. Peter Greenwood is 3 years old in the spring of 1946. His hair catches light like wheat stalks in July, fine strands that fall perpetually across his forehead no matter how often his mother smooths them back with spit-dampened fingers. He has the round softness of early childhood, cheeks that flush pink when he runs, and a way of focusing on objects that seems unusual for someone so young. The Greenwood home sits on a street of similar houses in Withernsea, each one narrow and upright, built shoulder to shoulder like people crowded onto a bus. The brick is weathered to a color somewhere between brown and gray. Inside, the rooms are compact but organized with military precision. The kitchen is the heart of the house, dominated by a cast-iron stove that misses. Peter's favorite spot in the entire house is beneath the kitchen table. He's small enough to fit comfortably in this cave-like space, his back against one wooden leg, his blocks spread around him in careful arrangements. Bill Greenwood, at 13, occupies a space between childhood and whatever comes next. He's tall for his age, still growing into limbs that seem slightly too long for his torso, giving him a gangly appearance that embarrasses him. He walks with deliberate purpose, trying to project a confidence he doesn't entirely feel. His father works at the docks in Hull when there's work to be had, which means irregular hours and irregular income. On days when his father is gone, Bill assumes the role of man of the house with a seriousness that would be touching if it weren't so clearly a burden. He checks the locks on doors. He asks his mother if she needs anything from town. He watches over his younger siblings with a mixture of affection and impatience. Peter tests this patience regularly. The boy moves at his own speed, which is to say slowly, distractedly, with frequent stops to examine things that Bill considers unworthy of notice. A stone, a crack in the pavement, the way shadows fall. "Come on then," Bill says, probably 10 times on any given walk. "We haven't got all day." He doesn't say it meanly, just with the exasperation of someone who has learned that repetition is the only way to keep Peter moving forward. But Bill also notices things that reveal a deeper care. He ties Peter's shoes when they come loose, double knotting them so they'll hold longer. He positions himself between Peter and the street when they walk on busy roads. He shares his portion of dessert when there's any to be had, sliding it across the table while pretending not to notice Peter's delighted surprise. The middle child, their sister at 10 years old, has their mother's dark hair and their father's quiet disposition. She reads voraciously when books are available, which isn't often. The library has limited hours and limited selection, depleted by the war years and not yet restocked. But she remembers everything she reads with perfect clarity, can recite passages verbatim weeks after finishing a book. The walk from the Greenwood home to Queen Street is a journey the children have made hundreds of times. They know every landmark, every shortcut, every place where the pavement is uneven, past the Johnson's house with its blue door that Mrs. Johnson repaints every spring in exactly the same shade. Tuesday, April 30th, 1946. The afternoon carries the particular quality of spring on the Yorkshire coast. Overcast but mild, the kind of day where the threat of rain hovers without materializing. The wind comes off the North Sea in steady gusts, not strong enough to require holding on to hats, but present enough to tug at clothing and carry the constant smell of salt and seaweed. The tide is out, exposing stretches of dark sand that glisten like wet stone under the flat gray sky. Around 3 o'clock, Mrs. Greenwood hands Bill a coin and a scrap of paper with her careful handwriting. "We need thread from the notions shop, and see if they have any buttons, brown ones if possible. Straight there and straight back." She looks at Peter, who's putting on his shoes by the door, fumbling with laces he hasn't quite mastered. "Mind your brother. Keep him close." Bill pockets the coin and the list. "Yes, Mum." He's already thinking about the walk, about stopping by the newsagent to look at the magazines he can't afford, about the possibility of seeing some of his school friends in town. Their sister is pulling on her cardigan, checking her reflection in the small mirror by the door, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Peter finally gets his shoes on, though the laces are loose, trailing. Bill notices but doesn't bend to fix them. "Come on then, let's go." They step out into the afternoon, pulling the door closed behind them. The street is quiet, a few neighbors visible in windows, an old man walking his terrier at the corner, a delivery boy on a bicycle rattling past with packages in his basket. The gulls cry overhead, their voices sharp against the general hum of town noise. The 3 children fall into their usual formation, Bill leading with his long-legged stride, their sister in the middle, Peter trailing behind by several paces. Peter stops almost immediately to watch the delivery boy disappear around the corner. The bicycle's wheels make a particular clicking sound that interests him. Bill glances back. "Peter, keep up." Peter starts walking again, his attention shifting to a cat sitting on a windowsill 3 houses down. The cat is gray with white paws, washing its face with one paw in that methodical way cats have. Peter slows, watching. His sister notices and waits for him to catch up. "It's just a cat," she says, not unkindly. "You've seen cats before." Peter nods, but keeps watching until the cat jumps down from the sill and disappears. They reach the corner where the lamppost leans at its permanent angle. Bill turns left without pausing, confident in the route. Their sister follows, talking to him about something that happened at school, a girl in her class who got in trouble for talking during lessons, a teacher who promised they'd start a new book next week. Their voices carry back to Peter as sound without distinct words, just the familiar rhythm of his siblings' conversation. He's examining a piece of broken glass in the gutter. The way it catches what little light penetrates the cloud cover and throws tiny fragments of color. He picks it up, turns it in his fingers, considers putting it in his pocket, but it's sharp along one edge, and he remembers his mother's warnings about broken things. He sets it down carefully and continues walking. Queen Street opens before them with its row of shops and the cozy cinema's pastel facade. A few people are out, housewives with shopping baskets, a man in a suit walking quickly with his head down, 2 older women standing outside the bakery engaged in conversation. Bill leads the way to the notions shop, a narrow establishment wedged between the greengrocer and a shop that sells newspapers and tobacco. The bell above the door chimes when they enter. Bill produces the list. "Thread, please. And brown buttons if you have them." The shopkeeper nods, turning to the shelves behind her, pulling down items with practiced efficiency. Their sister drifts toward a display of ribbons, touching them lightly, admiring the colors. Peter stands near the door, looking out through the glass at the street beyond. A man walks past, then a woman pushing a pram. A dog trots by, no owner visible. Peter watches all of this with his characteristic focus, absorbing the movement and life of the street. The transaction takes only a few minutes. Bill counts out the coins carefully, receives the small wrapped package, tucks it into his pocket. "Thank you, ma'am." They file back out onto the street, the bell chiming again as the door closes. The afternoon has progressed, the light beginning its slow fade, though full darkness is still hours away. Bill adjusts his jacket and starts walking toward home. Their sister falls into step beside him, resuming her earlier conversation. Peter follows, his attention caught by the window display of the bakery across the street. Loaves of bread arranged in a pyramid, a cake with white icing visible on the top shelf. Bill Greenwood and his sister reach their front door, still talking, still absorbed in their conversation about school and dinner and the evening ahead. Bill reaches for the handle, turns it, pushes the door open. They step inside, shedding jackets, calling out to their mother. "We're back. Got everything you needed." Mrs. Greenwood emerges from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Good. Put the package on the table. She looks past them, toward the still open door. Where's Peter? Bill turns, expecting to see his little brother coming up the path behind them, trailing as always. The path is empty. He frowns, looks at his sister. She's already moving back toward the door, craning her neck to see up and down the street. He was right behind us, she says, her voice uncertain. He was just there. Go find him, Mrs. Greenwood says, her tone sharpening. Right now, he's probably stopped to look at something. Bill, go. Bill is already moving, back out the door, down the path, onto the street. His sister follows. They retrace their route, walking quickly, calling Peter's name. Peter! Come on, this isn't funny. Peter. The street is quiet. A neighbor waters plants in her window box. Two boys kick a ball against a wall farther down. No sign of a 3-year-old in a brown jacket with untied shoes. They reach the corner where they turned, the spot where Peter should have been right behind them. Nothing. Bill's stomach tightens. He has to be here somewhere. He couldn't have just... He doesn't finish the sentence. They split up, Bill going left, his sister going right, both calling, both checking alleys and doorways, and the spaces between buildings where a small child might wander. 10 minutes pass. 15. They meet back at the corner, both empty-handed, both frightened now, though neither says it aloud. We need to tell Mum, their sister says. Her voice is shaking. We need to tell Dad. They run home. Mrs. Greenwood sees their faces and knows immediately that this is not a case of Peter dawdling or hiding. Her own face goes white. He's not there? You didn't find him? Bill shakes his head, chest heaving, unable to form words. Mrs. Greenwood moves with sudden, decisive speed. She grabs her shawl from the hook by the door. Show me exactly where you last saw him. Exactly. The three of them return to the corner, to the spot where Bill and his sister turned while Peter was still behind them. Mrs. Greenwood's eyes scan every inch of the street, the pavement, the buildings. How far behind was he? Show me. Bill tries to remember, tries to reconstruct the moment. Maybe 10 paces? I don't know. I didn't think. His voice breaks. Mrs. Greenwood grips his shoulder, hard. It's not your fault. We're going to find him. We're going to find him right now. She begins knocking on doors, first the nearest houses, then working outward in widening circles. Have you seen a little boy? 3 years old, light hair, brown jacket. He was walking home with his siblings and now we can't find him. Most people shake their heads, apologize, offer to help search. A few have been inside all afternoon and wouldn't have seen anything. One woman thinks she might have seen a child matching that description, but she's not certain. It might have been 20 minutes ago, might have been longer, might have been a different child altogether. By 5 o'clock, a dozen neighbors are searching. By 6, the number has doubled. Men form groups and check the beach, the cliffs, the abandoned buildings at the edge of town. Women search gardens and sheds, and anywhere a child might hide or become trapped. Mrs. Greenwood moves through the streets calling Peter's name until her voice goes hoarse. Mr. Greenwood, arrived home from work to find the house in chaos, has gone to fetch the police. 2 constables arrive as the light begins to fail. They take statements from Bill and his sister separately, asking the same questions in different ways. What time did you leave the house? What route did you take? When did you last see your brother? Did you notice anyone unusual? Any cars? Any strangers? Bill answers as best he can, but the afternoon has already started to fragment in his memory. He was talking to his sister. He was thinking about other things. He turned the corner and assumed Peter was following. That's what Peter always did. He followed. The constables are methodical but limited by the resources of 1946 policing. They have no radios, no rapid way to spread information beyond sending runners to neighboring towns. They organize the searchers into groups, assign areas, coordinate efforts. But as night falls completely and lanterns are lit, the search becomes more difficult. Shadows deepen. Visibility drops. The possibility that Peter has fallen somewhere, injured and unable to call out, becomes more frightening with every passing hour. Mrs. Greenwood refuses to stop. She walks the streets with a lantern, calling her son's name, peering into every dark corner, refusing to believe he could simply vanish. Mr. Greenwood, his face set in grim lines, coordinates with the police and the search parties. Bill and his sister are sent home, told to wait there in case Peter returns on his own. They sit in the kitchen, not speaking, listening to the sounds of searchers passing outside, voices calling through the darkness. By midnight, the organized search is scaled back. The police promise to continue at first light. Volunteers drift home, exhausted, promising to return in the morning. Mrs. Greenwood is finally persuaded to come inside, though she stands at the window watching the street, jumping at every sound. The house feels wrong without Peter, too quiet, too empty. The space under the kitchen table where he played with his blocks now a void that seems to pulse with absence. Dawn comes cold and gray. The search resumes immediately, with even more volunteers. The police bring in officers from neighboring towns. The beach is scoured again, more thoroughly. Teams walking in lines looking for any sign, footprints, clothing, anything. The cliffs are examined, officers lowering themselves on ropes to check crevices and ledges. The cozy cinema, the shops, every building on Queen Street and beyond, all checked, all empty of any trace of Peter Greenwood. Detective Inspector Thomas Hartley arrives on the second day. He's a man in his 40s, experienced, with a reputation for thoroughness. He sits down with the Greenwood family in their small parlor, his notebook open on his knee. I need you to tell me everything again. Every detail, no matter how small. Something you think is unimportant might be the key. Bill goes through the story again. The walk to town, the notions shop, the walk home, turning the corner, realizing Peter wasn't behind them. His hands shake as he talks. Hartley writes everything down, his handwriting small and precise. Did you see anyone on the street? Anyone at all? Bill struggles to remember. There were people, there are always people, but faces blur together, strangers whose presence registered only as background noise. A woman with a pram. An old man. Someone in a dark coat, I think. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention. Hartley turns to the sister. She provides the same information with slight variations. She remembers the woman with the pram more clearly. She thinks there might have been a car parked on Queen Street, but she's not sure where or what kind. Everything that seemed unremarkable at the time now feels potentially significant, but the details won't solidify. Memory is unreliable, especially under stress. The detective interviews neighbors, shopkeepers, anyone who might have been on Queen Street or the surrounding streets that afternoon. A pattern emerges of a quiet, ordinary day with ordinary traffic. No one reports seeing Peter alone. No one saw a struggle or heard a cry. The boy simply ceased to be visible at some point between the cozy cinema and his home, a distance of perhaps 400 yards. In that space and time, he disappeared. Theories develop. The first and most feared is the sea. Could Peter have wandered toward the beach? Could he have fallen from the cliffs? Search parties spend days examining every inch of coastline, but the North Sea yields nothing. No small body washes ashore. No clothing, no shoes, no blocks from his pockets if he had any. The water is thoroughly searched within the limits of 1946 technology, but it's vast and deep and keeps its secrets well. The second theory is abduction. Someone took him, quickly and quietly, in the brief window when he was alone on the street. But who? And why? There's been no ransom demand, no contact from anyone claiming to have Peter. Hartley interviews every man in Withernsea who might fit the profile of someone capable of such an act. Men with criminal records, men known for odd behavior, men who live alone or are new to town. Each interview produces nothing, alibis that check out, denials that seem genuine, no evidence linking anyone to Peter's disappearance. Posters go up around town and in neighboring communities. Missing. Peter Greenwood, age 3. Light hair, brown jacket. Last seen April 30th on Queen Street, Withernsea. The sepia photograph. Peter smiling slightly, hair falling across his forehead, is reproduced in newspapers across Yorkshire. Tips come in. A boy matching Peter's description was seen in Hull. Investigated. Wrong child. Someone thinks they saw a man carrying a small child to a car near the beach. Investigated, the man was carrying his own son. Identity confirmed. Each lead is pursued with thoroughness, and each evaporates under scrutiny. By the end of May, the active daily search has wound down. The case remains open, Hartley remains assigned to it, but the intensive mobilization of the first weeks cannot be sustained indefinitely. Life in Withernsea gradually returns to a semblance of normality, though the Greenwood family exists in a state of suspended animation. Summer arrives. The beach fills with visitors again. The war is over, rationing is easing, and people are trying to remember how to be normal. The Greenwood case becomes part of Withernsea's darker history, a story told in hushed voices, a reminder that terrible things can happen anywhere. And Peter Greenwood, 3 years old forever in the photograph on the poster, becomes a ghost, present in absence, alive in memory, lost to everyone who loved him. 1951. 5 years have passed since Peter Greenwood disappeared. Detective Inspector Hartley, now with graying hair and lines etched deep around his eyes, pulls the file from the cabinet in his office. The folder has grown thicker with time. Supplemental reports, follow-up interviews, theories explored and abandoned. He opens it on his desk, reviewing the contents he's practically memorized. Every few months, he does this, reviews everything, looks for something he might have missed. The answer is always the same. Nothing new reveals itself. The Greenwood household has reorganized itself around the absence. Mrs. Greenwood has aged in ways that have nothing to do with the passage of 5 years. Her hair is streaked with gray. Her face has settled into permanent lines of grief. She still keeps Peter's room untouched, his blocks under the table, his clothes folded in drawers, his bed made with military precision. Mr. Greenwood has stopped asking her to put these things away. He understands that this shrine is how she keeps their son alive. And who is he to say that's wrong? Bill Greenwood is 18 now, finished with school, working at the docks alongside his father. He's grown tall and solid, his boyish, gangly frame filled out with muscle from manual labor. He rarely smiles. His friends from school have noticed the darkness that clings to him, the way he goes quiet when conversations turn to childhood memories. He's planning to leave Withernsea. Not immediately, but soon. He's saved money, made inquiries about work in other towns. His parents don't know yet. He dreads telling them, dreads being seen as abandoning them on top of everything else. But he can't stay in this town where every street corner is a reminder of the afternoon when he turned his back and his brother vanished. Their sister left for university 2 years ago. She writes letters home weekly, dutiful and affectionate, but she doesn't visit often. She's built a life in a city where no one knows her story, where she can be anonymous, just another student studying literature and drinking tea in campus cafeterias. When she does return to Withernsea for holidays, she stays only as long as politeness demands. The house suffocates her with its preserved grief. Hartley retires in 1956. His last day on the force, he hands the Greenwood file to a younger detective named Morrison. "Don't let it get buried," Hartley says. "That family deserves answers, even if we can't find them." Morrison nods, takes the file, and Hartley walks out of the station, knowing he's failed. He'll think about Peter Greenwood often in his retirement, wonder if the answer was something obvious he somehow missed. 1963. Bill Greenwood, now 30, has married and moved to Gloucestershire. His wife knows about Peter. He told her early in their courtship because it felt dishonest not to, but they don't speak of it often. Bill has built a life that looks normal from the outside. Steady job, modest house, plans for children of their own someday. But several times a year he makes the journey back to Withernsea. He tells his wife he's visiting his parents, which is true but incomplete. He also walks the route, the same walk he took with Peter that April afternoon. He stands on the corner where he last saw his brother and tries to understand how a child can simply cease to exist. Mrs. Greenwood dies in 1972. Heart attack, the doctor says, but everyone knows it was grief that killed her. Grief that took 26 years to finish the job it started in 46. At the funeral, Bill stands beside his father and stares at the casket and thinks about how his mother went to her grave, never knowing what happened to her youngest child. This ignorance, this permanent question mark, killed her as surely as any disease. Mr. Greenwood follows her in 1978. Bill inherits the house but can't bear to live in it. He sells it to a young family who know nothing of its history. He watches them move in with their 2 small children and feels something twist in his chest. Envy, perhaps, or sorrow, or both. Before he leaves Withernsea with the last of his parents' possessions, he stops at the police station. The Greenwood file still exists, he's told, though it's been moved to long-term storage. Would he like to review it? He declines. What would be the point? The 1980s pass. Bill's hair grays. His wife gives birth to 2 daughters, then a son. He's a good father, attentive and protective, but his children sense there's something he carries that he'll never share fully. Sometimes they catch him staring at nothing, his face unreadable. When they ask what he's thinking about, he always says the same thing: nothing important, just remembering. Technology advances. DNA analysis becomes standard in criminal investigations. Cold case units are formed in police departments across Britain. Bill reads about cases being solved decades after the crimes occurred. Murders, disappearances, mysteries that seemed unsolvable yielding to new techniques. He allows himself to hope, if they can solve those cases, why not Peter's? 1997. 51 years since Peter vanished. Bill contacts Humberside Police, the force now responsible for Withernsea after various reorganizations and mergers. He asks about the case. Could they review it with modern methods? Could DNA help? The officer he speaks with is polite but non-committal. The case is still technically open, he's told. But without physical evidence to analyze, DNA can't help them. Still, they'll look into it. They'll see what might be possible. He starts collecting newspaper clippings about cold case breakthroughs. He follows developments in forensic technology with the attention of a scholar. When commercial DNA testing becomes available, he submits his own sample to multiple databases. Maybe, he thinks, if Peter was taken and raised elsewhere, if he had children who have taken DNA tests, a match might appear. He checks the results obsessively. Distant cousins appear, 4th, 5th-degree relations he's never heard of, but nothing that would indicate a direct line to Peter. Nothing that would suggest his brother lived and had a family. The year 2000 arrives. Bill is 67, retired, spending his days tending a small garden and making trips to Withernsea that his wife has stopped questioning. His children are grown with families of their own. One of his granddaughters, Kizzy, has taken an interest in the family story. She's young, bright, fascinated by true crime podcasts and cold case documentaries. She asks Bill questions no one else dares to ask. "Do you think he's still alive somewhere?" she asks one Sunday afternoon. Bill, pruning roses in his garden, considers the question seriously. "I used to," he says finally. "Now I just want to know what happened, that's all, just to know." In the autumn of 2002, on a Tuesday afternoon, not unlike the 156 years earlier, Bill Greenwood receives a letter. His name and address are handwritten on the envelope in careful, deliberate script. No return address. Postmark, East Yorkshire. He opens it standing in his kitchen, his wife washing dishes at the sink, afternoon light streaming through the window. The letter is brief, handwritten on plain paper. The words make his hands start to shake. "I know what happened to Peter Greenwood on April 30th, 1946. The truth has been kept secret for too long. Someone in Withernsea knows. They always knew." There's no signature, no contact information, just these sentences and the enormous weight they carry. Bill reads the letter 3 times, then a 4th. His wife, noticing his stillness, turns from the sink. "What is it?" "Bill, what's wrong?" He shows her the letter. Her face goes pale. "Who sent this? Why now, after all these years?" Bill shakes his head. He doesn't know, but the letter confirms what he's always believed, that Peter's disappearance wasn't a complete mystery, that somewhere in Withernsea, someone held the truth and never spoke. The question is whether that person is still alive, still capable of revealing what they know, and whether, after 56 years, the truth can still be found. He takes the letter to the police the next day. The letter arrives at Humberside Police Headquarters in a plastic evidence bag, handled carefully despite its age. Detective Sergeant Lauren Matthews, assigned to the cold case unit, examines it under proper lighting in the forensic lab. The paper is standard, available at any stationer's. The ink is from a ballpoint pen, black, no distinctive characteristics. The handwriting is neat, controlled, suggesting someone older who learned penmanship in an era when such things mattered. Matthews orders a full forensic workup despite limited expectations. Fingerprint analysis reveals only smudged partials, useless for identification. DNA extraction from the envelope seal is attempted, but yields degraded material insufficient for profiling. The postmark confirms the letter was mailed from Hull on October 14, 2002, but Hull's sorting center handles mail from dozens of surrounding communities. The linguistic analysis is more promising. The phrasing suggests someone educated, local to Yorkshire, based on certain word choices, likely over 60 years old based on vocabulary and syntax patterns. Bill Greenwood is interviewed extensively. Does he recognize the handwriting? No. Does he have suspicions about who might have sent it? He offers theories. Neighbors from the old street, now elderly. Children of those neighbors who might have overheard something. Someone who was an adult in 46 and is now nearing the end of life. Conscience finally outweighing whatever reason kept them silent. Matthews writes it all down, recognizing the speculation for what it is, grief grasping for answers. The investigation reignites with more resources than the case has seen in decades. Matthews assembles a team, pulls the original file from archives, begins the painstaking process of reconstructing what was known in 46 and what can be known now. The original witness statements are reviewed. Some of the individuals interviewed back then are still alive, in their 70s, 80s, even 90s. Matthews begins the process of re-interviewing them. An 83-year-old woman who lived on the route Peter walked remembers the search, remembers the Greenwood family's devastation, but has nothing new to add. She was inside that afternoon, didn't see anything. A 90-year-old man who helped with the search recalls checking the beach, walking the cliffs, finding nothing. His memory of the specific day has blurred with time, details lost or conflated with other memories from that era. Matthews focuses on the letter's specific claim. Someone in Withernsea knows. They always knew. This suggests local knowledge, possibly a witness who never came forward, or someone who heard a confession or overheard something incriminating. The detective begins mapping out who was where in April 46, looking for individuals whose behavior changed after Peter's disappearance. Anyone who left town suddenly, anyone who displayed unusual guilt or interest in the case, anyone who might have harbored dangerous inclinations. The historical records are frustrating. 1946 was a time of population flux, demobilized soldiers returning home, displaced persons moving through, transient workers following available jobs. The precise accounting of who was in Withernsea that specific Tuesday is impossible. The police records from that era are incomplete, some lost during various departmental reorganizations over the decades. What remains is fragmentary, suggestive rather than definitive. The BBC picks up the story. Anonymous letter reignites 56-year mystery runs as a feature on regional news. Charlie O'Loughlin, a journalist specializing in cold cases, produces a radio documentary. The story reaches a national audience. The switchboard at Humberside Police lights up with tips. Most are well-intentioned but useless. People who remember hearing about the case, people with theories but no evidence, people who claim psychic visions or dreams. A few are more substantive. An elderly woman in Leeds calls to say her uncle, now deceased, once mentioned something about a missing boy in Withernsea, said it was sordid in a way that made her uncomfortable at the time. She was a child then, didn't understand, forgot about it until hearing the radio program. Matthews follows up. The uncle died in 1987. No other family members remember him saying anything about Peter Greenwood. The lead dissolves. A man in his 70s contacts the police claiming he saw a car parked on a street near where Peter was last seen, a car that didn't belong to anyone local. He remembers because it was a nice car, unusual for the area. But his memory of the specific date is uncertain. Might have been that day, might have been another day that same week. And even if the car was there on April 30th, there's no way to trace it now. No license plate remembered, just a vague description. Dark-colored, larger model. Thousands of such cars existed in 46. Matthews turns to modern technology. Investigative genetic genealogy has solved cold cases, thought impossible, murders from the 70s, 80s, even earlier. The principle is straightforward. Compare DNA from the crime scene or victim's family with public databases. Build family trees. Identify potential suspects or unidentified remains. Bill Greenwood has already submitted his DNA to commercial databases. Matthews coordinates with genetic genealogists to search more aggressively. The theory being tested is survival, that Peter was abducted and raised under a different identity. If so, and if he later had children, those children's DNA would share significant markers with Bill's. The search yields matches, but they're all explainable as distant relatives, branches of the Greenwood family tree that diverged generations ago. Nothing suggests a direct line to Peter. Nothing indicates he survived, married, had descendants who might not know their father's true origin. The alternative application of genetic genealogy is identifying remains. Matthews contacts coroners' offices across the UK, requesting information on unidentified child remains from the late 40s and 50s. Several cases are flagged as possibilities: children found deceased, never identified, buried as unknown. DNA samples are obtained from these remains and compared with Bill's profile. None match. Peter Greenwood is not among the unidentified dead, at least not among those whose remains were found and preserved. By 2005, the investigation has explored every avenue the letter opened. The forensic analysis yielded no usable evidence. The witness re-interviews produced no new information. The genetic genealogy found no connections. The letter writer never contacted police again, never provided additional details. Matthews is forced to conclude what Hartley concluded 50 years earlier. Without physical evidence or a living witness willing to speak openly, the case cannot be solved. She meets with Bill Greenwood in her office to deliver this news. He's 72 now, his face deeply lined, his hands spotted with age. He listens without interrupting as she explains what they've done, what they've found, what remains unknown. When she finishes, he's quiet for a long moment. Then he says, "The letter told me something important, though. It told me I wasn't wrong all these years. Someone did know, someone kept quiet, and maybe they're dead now, took the secret with them. But at least I know I wasn't imagining it." Matthews nods. She's seen this before. Families for whom partial knowledge is better than complete void. The letter didn't solve the mystery, but it confirmed that a mystery existed beyond simple accident or misfortune. Someone's deliberate actions, someone's deliberate silence, shaped what happened to Peter Greenwood. That knowledge is cold comfort, but it's something. Bill stands to leave, then pauses. "Will you keep looking? Even if it's just checking now and then, when new technology comes along?" Matthews promises she will. The file will remain open. The case will be reviewed periodically. If new techniques emerge, they'll be applied. If someone decides to talk, they'll listen. Bill thanks her and walks out into the afternoon, carrying the same weight he's carried for 59 years, lightened not at all but perhaps understood slightly better. The media coverage fades. The tips stop coming. The Peter Greenwood case returns to the archives, still unsolved, still haunting, still waiting. And somewhere, perhaps in Withernsea, perhaps somewhere else entirely, someone knows what happened on that April afternoon in 1946. Whether they're alive or dead, whether they'll ever speak or take the knowledge to the grave, remains unknown. The silence continues, as deep and impenetrable as it's been for 6 decades. But the question persists, refuses to fade, demands an answer that may never come. 2023. Kizzy Elliott sits at her laptop in her flat in Leeds, scrolling through a Facebook group called Withernsea Memories. The group has nearly 4,000 members, current residents, former residents, people with family connections to the seaside town. They share old photographs, discuss changes to the landscape, reminisce about businesses long closed and people long gone. Kizzy joined the group 6 months ago while researching her family history. Now she's about to share something that's been waiting 77 years to be seen by this particular audience. She uploads the photograph, the sepia image of Peter Greenwood, 3 years old, hair falling across his forehead, the hint of a smile on his round face. The image has been digitally restored, cleaned up from decades of handling and storage. She types a caption, "This is Peter Greenwood, my great-uncle. He disappeared on April 30th, 1946, while walking home on Queen Street. He was 3 years old. If anyone has any information, any memories passed down from family members who were in Withernsea that day, please contact me or Humberside Police." The family has been searching for answers for 77 years. She hits post and closes the laptop, not expecting much. But within an hour, the notifications start coming. Shares, comments, people tagging others. saying, "Didn't your grandmother live on Queen Street? Or wasn't your dad part of the search party?" The post spreads beyond the Withernsea group, shared to other Yorkshire community pages, to true crime groups, to historical societies. By the next morning, it has been shared 300 times. Most of the responses are expressions of sympathy and support, but a few are more substantive. A woman in her 80s comments that her mother, now deceased, used to mention the missing Greenwood boy, said it haunted her that no one ever found him. A man shares that his grandfather helped with the search, walked the beach for days looking for any sign. These aren't new information, but they're threads connecting past to present, proving that the memory hasn't completely faded. One comment catches Kizzy's attention. A user named Margaret Thornton writes, "My aunt was a teacher in Withernsea in the 40s. Before she died in 2015, she mentioned once that there was talk at the time about a man who left town very suddenly after a child went missing. She said people wondered, but no one wanted to point fingers without proof. I don't know if this helps, but thought I should share." Kizzy screenshots the comment and forwards it to Humberside Police. It's not evidence, just third-hand recollection of gossip from 77 years ago. But it's another piece, another indication that the truth was never as hidden as the silence suggested. People wondered. People suspected. But fear or uncertainty or respect for propriety kept them quiet. The Facebook post does something else, something perhaps more important than generating leads. It humanizes Peter Greenwood for a new generation. The photograph shows not a case file or a statistic, but a child, specific, individual, real. The comments fill with people saying they'll share the post, they'll keep their eyes open, they'll ask elderly relatives if they remember anything. The collective memory of Withernsea is activated, pulled forward from the past into the present moment. In Gloucestershire, Bill Greenwood sits in his living room while his granddaughter explains what she's done. He's 89 now, his mobility limited, his hearing aided by devices, but his mind sharp. He looks at the laptop screen showing the Facebook post, scrolls slowly through the comments, and something in his face softens. "All these people," he says quietly. "All these people who still remember, or who care enough to respond. I thought everyone had forgotten." "They haven't forgotten," Kizzy says, "and they won't. I'm going to make sure of it." In 2025, Humberside Police announce a formal review of the Peter Greenwood case, prompted by the renewed public interest and advances in forensic technology. Detective Inspector Sarah Chen leads the review. She's young, early 40s, part of a generation that grew up with DNA evidence and digital databases and investigative tools that would have seemed like science fiction in 1946. Chen approaches the case with fresh eyes and modern resources. The original evidence, what little exists, is re-examined with current forensic capabilities. The 2002 letter is analyzed again with techniques unavailable 20 years earlier. Advanced DNA extraction methods are applied, yielding a partial profile from the envelope seal. It's not enough to identify the sender definitively, but it's enough to rule out certain possibilities and confirm that the sender was likely female, likely over 60 at the time of writing, likely of European descent. This information is interesting but not actionable. The sender, if she was 60 in 2002, would be 83 now, possibly still alive, possibly willing to provide more information, but impossible to identify without additional clues. Chen puts out another public appeal. If the letter writer is still alive, please come forward. The appeal generates media attention but no response from the writer. The genetic genealogy approach is pursued more aggressively. Chen works with specialists who have solved high-profile cold cases using public DNA databases and family tree reconstruction. Bill Greenwood's DNA is compared against updated databases with millions more profiles than were available 20 years earlier. The search is expanded to include not just direct descendants of Peter, but also more distant relatives who might provide clues to unidentified remains or unknown family connections. Months pass. The genetic genealogists build extensive family trees, tracking branches of the Greenwood lineage across 3 generations. Some matches are found, distant cousins, people who share a great-great-grandparent with Bill, now scattered across the UK and beyond. Each match is investigated, relationships confirmed, but none lead to Peter. The hope that Peter survived, lived a full life under another identity, had children who might unknowingly be walking around with Greenwood DNA, fades with each dead end. By early 2026, Chen delivers her findings to Bill Greenwood. They meet at his home, Chen sitting across from the elderly man who has spent 80 years waiting for answers. "We've applied every available technique," she says. "The genetic analysis found no evidence that Peter survived and had descendants. The forensic review of historical evidence revealed no new leads. The witness appeals generated no actionable information. I'm sorry, Mr. Greenwood. We're no closer to solving this than we were in 46. Bill nods slowly. He's not surprised. Not really. After 8 decades, he's learned to live with uncertainty. But hearing it stated so plainly still hurts. What happens now? "The case remains open," Chen says. "If new information emerges, if someone comes forward, if technology advances in ways that open new possibilities, we'll pursue them. Your family's DNA will remain in our databases. The case will be reviewed again in 5 years. We're not giving up, Mr. Greenwood. We're just acknowledging the limitations of what we can currently do." She leaves him sitting in his chair, staring at the photograph of Peter on the mantelpiece, the same sepia image now circulating on social media, preserved and restored, a 3-year-old frozen in time. Bill has outlived both his parents, his sister, most of his generation. He's seen technology transform the world, seen cases that seemed impossible get solved through DNA and digital forensics. But his brother remains lost, the question that defined his life still unanswered. Kizzy continues her digital advocacy. She starts a dedicated website, Find Peter Greenwood. She shares historical photographs of Withernsea in the 40s, maps showing the route Peter walked, timelines of the investigation. She connects with other families of the long-term missing, joins networks of cold case advocates, appears on podcasts discussing the case. She refuses to let Peter fade into obscurity. The impact of Peter's disappearance extends beyond his immediate family. The case is now studied in criminology courses as an example of how missing persons investigations have evolved. The lack of immediate action in the critical first hours, Bill and his sister searching on their own before alerting adults, the delay in involving police, illustrates why rapid response protocols are now standard. The development of the Family Liaison Officer system, which began in the 90s, was informed by cases like Peter's, where families were left isolated and uninformed during investigations. Withernsea itself has changed almost beyond recognition from the town where Peter disappeared. The cozy cinema is long gone, replaced by a convenience store. Queen Street has been repaved, buildings demolished and rebuilt. The physical landscape transformed by 8 decades of erosion and development. But some things remain. The lighthouse still stands, still operational, still sweeping its beam across the water. The North Sea still crashes against the shrinking coastline. And the street where Peter walked, where he lagged behind his siblings, distracted by small wonders, moving at his own pace toward home, still exists, now carrying traffic and pedestrians who have no idea of its significance. The Withernsea Memories Facebook group has become a de facto memorial space. On April 30th each year, members post remembrances. 80 years ago today, Peter Greenwood disappeared. The photograph is shared again. People who never knew him, who weren't born when he vanished, leave comments expressing hope that someday the truth will emerge. It's become a community ritual, a way of saying that Peter mattered, that his life and his loss continue to resonate. Bill Greenwood's health declines through 2026. He's 90 now, his body failing even as his mind remains clear. Kizzy visits often, brings her laptop, shows him the continued engagement with Peter's case online. Thousands of people now know Peter's name, know his story, care about finding answers. Bill finds this comforting. He hasn't been forgotten, he says repeatedly. That's important. He hasn't been forgotten. In the quiet moments, Bill reflects on his life shaped by absence. The guilt he carried for decades has softened but never disappeared. The what-ifs still surface sometimes. What if he'd held Peter's hand? What if he'd looked back sooner? What if? But he's learned, slowly and painfully, that guilt without responsibility is a form of self-punishment that serves no purpose. He was 13 years old, walking home on an ordinary day. He couldn't have known what would happen. He couldn't have prevented it. Understanding this intellectually has never quite convinced his heart. but it's enough to live with. He thinks about his parents, both dead for decades, both buried with the question unanswered. He thinks about Peter himself, not as the perpetual 3-year-old in the photograph, but as the man he would have become, 82 years old now, if he lived. Would he have stayed in Withernsea, or left like Bill? Would he have married, had children, built a life? Or did he die on that April day in 46, his life measured in years that can be counted on one hand? The truth is somewhere, Bill knows. In someone's memory, in a document not yet discovered, in a piece of evidence overlooked or destroyed. The truth exists because truth is what happened. And something happened on April 30th, 1946. Peter Greenwood didn't simply cease to exist. He went somewhere, or was taken somewhere, or fell somewhere. The silence that has surrounded his disappearance for 8 decades is not the absence of an answer, but the presence of secrets kept, deliberately, or through death. Kizzy has promised to continue the search after Bill is gone. "I'll keep looking," she tells him. "I'll keep asking. I'll keep Peter's name alive." Bill believes her. This new generation, with their technology and their refusal to accept that any mystery is truly unsolvable, might succeed where his generation failed. Or they might not. Either way, the trying matters. On a Tuesday afternoon in late April 2026, not the anniversary, just a random day that happens to fall on the same day of the week as the original disappearance, Bill sits at his window watching rain fall on the garden he can no longer tend. He thinks about Peter, as he does every day, has done every day for 80 years, and he allows himself a small measure of peace, with the knowledge that he never stopped looking, never stopped caring, never let his brother become a forgotten statistic in a dusty file. The rain continues. The North Sea, 200 miles away, continues its patient erosion of the Holderness coast. In Withernsea, people walk the streets where Peter walked, unknowing, going about their ordinary lives. And somewhere in the archives at Humberside Police Headquarters, the file marked Peter Greenwood, missing person, 1946, remains open, waiting. The silence that began on an April afternoon in 1946 persists, deep and stubborn. But so does the search. So does the love. So does the refusal to forget. The question endures. Where is Peter Greenwood? The answer, 8 decades later, remains the same. Unknown, but not unremembered, never unremembered. And as long as someone asks the question, as long as someone searches, as long as someone speaks his name, Peter Greenwood exists, not as a ghost, not as a tragedy, but as a child who mattered, whose life had value, whose absence leaves a space that cannot be filled, but can be acknowledged, honored, and held in memory across generations. The story is unfinished. But it is not over.